Hello, my name is Amanda and welcome to my first video for 2016. So to start the year off, I thought I would show you my own personal collection of quilts that I have in my house. I thought that maybe it might just be a lovely little glimpse of inspiration for you, or just to sort of be nosy and to see what I have in my own collection of quilts. That's cool if you are nosy like that. I'm nosy like that too. So I have a nice huge pile of quilts here beside me and I cannot wait to show you what I have in my collection. So the majority of the quilts that I own are ones that I've made for myself, because I think it's fine to be selfish like that. If you're a quilter, use the talent and make one for yourself, that's fine. The other ones that I have in my collection are ones that I've made just for the house, just to drape on the lounge and to snuggle up under when you're watching TV. And there are other ones that I've made for a few quilt shows, as well as a couple that I've made for you guys with my YouTube channel. So the first one that I've got to show you is one that I've shown you before and I've talked to you about before, and it's the first quilt that I ever made, and it was this square and square pattern, and I made this in 2006. That was the first year that I started quilting. It was my first year out of high school. It was my first year working at Spotlight, which is a big fabric store here in Australia, and it's from that job that inspired me to start quilting. And it was actually this fabric here that I absolutely fell in love with. It was a quilting fabric and I thought, if I'm going to use it, let's try and make a quilt. So I got some quilting books for my birthday from one of my best friends, and this pattern was in that book, and so I made it and I absolutely love it. All of the different fabrics in this quilt were matched with the main print fabric that I used, and it was just such a simple and beautiful quilt to make. When I made this quilt, I was such a novice with quilt making. I actually didn't cut out all of the bits with a rotary blade and cutter. I actually sort of traced it all with pencil and then cut out every piece with a pair of scissors. It took me forever, but I think it really made me appreciate the cutting and piecing stage when it comes to quilting. And I think making this quilt really struck like a light bulb in me of just how much I love quilting and how much fun it is. So this quilt is very, very precious to me and I love it. I love it. I love it. Purpose of this one, this is my snuggle quilt when I'm watching TV. It is my lounge quilt and I absolutely love snuggling underneath it. It's perfect for that. The next quilt in my collection is this one. I have called this quilt Just Because I made this quilt just because I could, pretty much. I really wanted to make a quilt that was quite traditional with lots of applique pieces and like the floral type design and leaves and things like that. And so I saw this pattern in an Australian quilting magazine and I thought, right, let's do it. Let's give it a go. And I think it took me at least 3 to 4 months to make completely, because I had to trace out all of the different shapes, had to cut them out, had to applique them, and then sew them all onto each of the blocks and so on and so forth. Now this is one of the lounge quilts that I was talking about. This one lives on the back of our lounge in our front room, and it just sort of gives a really beautiful quilty, patchworky type feel to the room. I really, really love this quilt for the modern traditionalist type vibe that it has, and that just pretty much sums up my aesthetic. I love making modern quilts with a traditional type twist in the backgrounds. Oh, and the date of this one is from 2008. The next quilt up is one that's a little bit more traditional. A lot of the colours in it are ones that I don't really use anymore, but it's lots of florals, which I loved at the time. And it's this one. It's sort of got like this basket weave, arrowy type design to it. I know that there's an official name, but I can't think of it at the moment. But I used a lot of my florally scrap fabrics in this one, and I also put in a few hints of little polka dots in it, just to sort of give it a little bit of, I don't know, Amanda-ness to it, I suppose. I don't know. But I saw this pattern again in an Australian patchwork magazine, and although it looks really complicated to make, it was really, really simple to piece together. So I spent a few months making this one, and it's an oldie but a goodie and is very, very nice. This one was made in 2009 and it's an extra quilt that goes on my bed. The next quilt up is this one. You can't really quite see it very well right now, but it is called Spring Flowers and it is made out of just 2 fabrics. I made this in 2010 and I made it with a fabric that I was absolutely loving at the moment because it it was just so beautiful and lovely. And I also had a ton of this cream fabric, which I actually also used with this quilt as well. It's here in the background. So because I had a ton of it, I had to try and use it all. I think I still have quite a lot left somewhere. So this was just a really simple lap quilt that I chose to make. It has 4 big sawtooth stars, I think that's what the block is called, with a really basic border around the edge, and then I also backed it with the same fabric that was on the front, and then the binding is the same as the fabric that I used in the blocks. So like I said, this is just a really basic lap quilt that I made for our house, and it's, yeah, just really basic, beautiful little quilt to snuggle under when watching TV. The next quilt that I have to show you was made in 2011, and it was during my time when I first discovered the awesomeness and beautiful prints of Cath Kidston, and I was still working at Spotlight at this time, and they brought in these beautiful drill and quilting fabrics that were so similar to all of the prints that she had at that time. So of course I bought them all, and then I made this beautiful quilt using some of the applique shapes in one of her books. I think it could be either Patch or Sew, I'm not sure, but I'll put up the details now for you. And so I made this lovely quilt using those fabrics. Now I am semi-happy with the way that this quilt turned out. It was sort of made on the fly. I sort of just made all of the applique blocks and then just sort of added random type borders around the edges. So it's a little bit weirdly shaped. It's a little bit long. The borders are a little bit weird, but I still really love it. I love the fabrics that were in it, and I do like the way that it turned out, but I was hoping for something just a little bit, I don't know, nicer. I just think it's a little bit, I don't know. So the name of this quilt is called Ode to Cath Kidston, and it is another quilt that lives in my room. I sort of drape it on one of the chairs that I have that sort of I use for all my clothes. But yeah, it's a beautiful quilt and I use it when I need to. The next quilt that I have to show you is actually my favourite quilt that I have ever made. I think it is such a darling, and it holds a special place in my heart, and I just really love it. And it is my Jacob's ladder quilt. Ta-da! So this quilt is made using some of the beautiful DS quilt fabrics that came out in 2012. I bought pretty much a ton of them because I absolutely love them, and I think some of these fabrics are still like some of my all-time favorites. So I had hoarded all of these beautiful fabrics, and I was looking and waiting for the perfect quilt design to pop up to use them all. And at the time I was doing a crafty course called Magical Jelly Roll Quilts or something like that with Kimberly Einmo, and she did the Jacob's ladder quilt, and I thought that is like the most perfect pattern to use all of my DS quilt fabrics with, and so that's what I did. And I love this quilt so much, and ever since I put this quilt up on my blog, it's been actually one of the most viewed blog posts and quilt that I've ever made. I'm continually seeing the layout of this quilt on Pinterest. It's really quite scary just how much I see the picture of this quilt coming together, and yeah, I'm just really grateful of this quilt because I think a lot of you have found me through my Jacob's ladder quilt. I get lots of questions about it, and a lot of you have actually made this quilt yourself and shown me pictures and said that my quilt has inspired yours, and it's just been, I don't know, a really sort of pivotal kind of quilt in my quilt making journey, process, career. I don't know what to really call it, but apart from that, I love this quilt because of the way it feels. It's beautiful to look at. It's not perfect, and that's what I love about quilt making. I'm not a machine. I can't do things perfectly, and this quilt definitely showcases that. I love that I was able to push my boundaries when making this quilt. This is possibly one of the first quilts I made that wasn't just blocks. Well, there were blocks, but they came together to make a bigger type design, and I think it's also one of the biggest quilts I've made in a while. So I just really love this quilt for its modernness, its colour, its pattern, its texture, just absolutely everything. I really love it, and I'm geeking out a little bit too much about it, so I'm going to move on. The next quilt that I have to show you is the first quilt I ever made and entered into a quilt competition, and it was the Sydney Quilt Show at Darling Harbour in 2013. And that quilt is my Minimalist and that quilt is my Minimalist 101 quilt, again made with beautiful DS fabrics matched with a beautiful white solid fabric. I made this using the Quilty Cross method from Auntie Cookie. There's a link to that pattern if you want to check it out. Now this quilt is something that I've had sort of in the back of my mind for a very long time. I think it's really quite contemporary in design. It's very minimalist, which is why I called it it's so hard to say, which is why I called it Minimalist 101. I quilted the absolute heck out of it and it took forever, I tell you what. The middle section sort of has like this crisscross sort of effect to it, and then all around it I sort of just quilted straight line after straight line after straight line, and it really did take forever. But as much as I love the front of this one, I also really love the back. I did a really lovely pieced back with this one. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but I put all of the extra blocks that I made on the back, and then I also included the selvage of the fabric that I used for the backing as well, just to sort of give it a little bit of interest. And I really liked the effect that it gave on the back. And with this one, it's usually folded up and placed somewhere where it won't get all dusty and weird, or I will hang it up in my sewing room for inspiration and just as a little bit of a nice backdrop in some of my videos. Another quilt that I have in my collection is the one that is hanging behind me. It is called the Happy Quilt, and I made this as a bit of a whim in 2013, and it is called the Happy Quilt because absolutely everything about it just makes me happy. I love the monkey wrench block that I was able to use. I love all of the fabrics that I was able to use. It's a very good scrappy type quilt to make. I love how the quilting isn't perfect. Just everything about it makes me happy or made me happy as I was making it, and so the name stuck, I guess. I did actually enter this quilt into a quilting competition at the Sydney Royal Easter Show during Easter in 2014, and it won highly commended. It's like my first ever award in a quilting competition, and I was so over the moon that I was able to win a ribbon and a certificate for it. I think it won highly commended in something, I'm not sure. I'll put it on the screen for you so you know what it was that I won it for, I guess. So once I got it back, I knew I had to sort of hang it up and sort of just, I don't know, love it for eternity, I guess. So where I have it hanging in my room is absolutely perfect. It's sort of in the center of everything. When you first walk into my room, it's what you see, and I love that. It's perfect for these sort of things in the background in my video, and yeah, I just really love it. It just makes me happy. That's why I called it the Happy Quilt. So the last two quilts that I have to share with you are the two quilts that I've made in my quilt-alongs last year. Can you believe last year was 2015? Anyway, so the first quilt that I made for my first ever quilt-along was Geode Dreams, using this beautiful geometric fabric, and the block that we used was the Father's Choice block, and we made 4 big gigantic blocks of that and pieced it all together. Now there was a time where I seriously considered selling this quilt because we have so many quilts in our house, and I just didn't really have anywhere to put it or have real purpose for it, which is not very good to say. But that thought sort of came and went very quickly because I absolutely love this quilt. I love the binding, I love the block, I love the backing. This color is just absolutely gorgeous, and you know, it's pretty sentimental because this is sort of like the fruit of my labor for, no, what? That's weird. It's also very sentimental because it's my first quilt that I made in my very first quilt along with you guys, so it has lots of memories, and you know, I really genuinely do love this quilt. It's really beautiful, and yeah, I will find purpose for it. I mean, at the moment it does hang up in my sewing room. You may see it in some of the backgrounds in my videos, and I think that's what I'll keep using it for. I really love the texture on this one as well. I think that's one of the big things I love about quilts is the texture of the quilting lines. I love running my hands over it. It's just very weird in that way. And so the last quilt in my collection is of course the one that I've made the most recently, and it is my quilt from my half square triangle quilt along sampler thing. And so that brings us to the last quilt in my collection, and it is of course my quilt from my half square triangle sampler quilt along series. I think that's what it was called. And so that brings us to the last quilt in my collection, and it is this one. It is of course the quilt that I made in my last half square triangle sampler quilt along series. The title is so long, seriously, it will be etched in my mind forever. And as I've mentioned many times before, I really do love this quilt. I love the way that it's turned out. I love the colours, I love the range that I was able to use, I love the way that it's turned out. I love the backing I was able to use. I love how much you've all sort of embraced it and joined in and learnt, and just everything. Everything about this quilt I love. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I really love the label. The label I think is one of my favourites. It's the same label I made for my other quilt along. I think for the quilt along quilts that I'll make in the future, I'll do the same thing. Just as a theme, as a sort of like, you know, little Easter egg type thing, you know, as you do. This is another quilt that doesn't really have a purpose in my house right now. It's just there. I think I'll make this one another lounge quilt, maybe just as like an extra to snuggle up under for someone, maybe. Either that, or it will sort of replace my last quilt along quilt and hang up in my sewing room. I'm not sure yet. So there are majority of the quilts that I have in my collection. I was going to show you the quilt that I made for my parents, but I can't find it. It's, I don't know, Mum's put it somewhere. I have no idea where it is. So apart from all of the quilts in my collection, I also have a ton of wall hangings and mini quilts that I've sort of hung up around our house. So if you would like to see those, let me know and I will do another sort of video like that with them. Now, to be honest, I really can't tell you how many quilts I've actually made over the last, oh my gosh, it's been 10 years since I started quilting. So over the last 10 years of my quilt making, I can't tell you how many quilts that I've made. Majority of the quilts that I do make are for others, usually as gifts or as sort of like a welcome to the world, mainly my nephews and niece, as well as for birthdays and anniversaries and weddings and all that sort of stuff. So I guess the only quilts that I ever have are ones that I've made for myself from a fabric that I just absolutely love and I can't give away, or they're ones that I've made specifically for my blog or for my YouTube, or for, you know, for the heck of it, I guess, or for competitions. Yeah, I haven't really done that in a while. Maybe I should do that this year. I don't know. So I really do hope that you enjoyed this little glimpse showcase into the quilts that I have in my own personal collection. Hopefully some of them have inspired you, or you've just sort of got some nice sort of thrills out of knowing what I have. So yeah, that's all I've really got to show you. After my little breakaway, I am so excited to get back into YouTube and blogging and sewing and quilting and all the other stuff that comes with doing this. So I really do hope that you will stick around and enjoy the things that I have to show you this year, and yeah, learn a few things and have fun in the process. So as always, friends, thank you all so much for watching and hope to see you another time very soon. Bye! Popular, and it just sort of seems to be absolutely everywhere, like literally everywhere. And that of course is Star Wars. So with the 7th episode of the franchise coming out this month, I sort of set aside time throughout the last couple of weeks